I'm Jace Lacob, and you're listening to Masterpiece Studio. For several seasons now, we've watched private sleuth Patrick Nash of Nash & Sons Detective Agency solve crimes and put criminals behind bars. But by the end of the last season of Miss Scarlet, it seems as if the tables have turned. In a crime of passion to avenge his late brother, Patrick Nash himself ended up in prison. And that's more or less where Eliza Scarlet finds him at the beginning of this season.
Still can't believe you're allowed to use this office.
Well, I'm not exactly allowed. In fact, the governor has no idea. It's through a little financial arrangement I have with the warden here.
You have a warden in your pay? You go to prison for that, Patrick.
For most 19th century London convicts, life behind bars means isolation, minimal comforts, and almost no contact with the outside world. But Patrick Nash isn't your typical convict. Somehow, he still has his ear to the ground and knows more than almost anyone about the goings-on in the seedy London crime world. By episode 4, Nash is released from prison, only to find out it's so he can do some shady detective work for Lord Campbell, who orchestrated his early release. With Nash's license revoked, his money gone, and no other prospects, he's forced to take on this case, a case that in the end also forces him to leave the city he calls home.
But I'm going to start afresh. I can't be a private investigator here anymore, but Australia. Out there, anything's possible. Now, I have a boat to catch.
Today, we're joined by Patrick Nash himself, actor Felix Scott, as we talk about his character's rise and fall and how he has unexpectedly become the ideal sounding board for Eliza Scarlet. And this week, we are joined by Miss Scarlet's star, Felix Scott. Welcome.
Hello, Jace. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Patrick Nash's first appearance comes in series 2 of Miss Scarlet. His first words to Eliza are, "How I have longed to meet the lady detective." What did you make of the character initially, and how has Nash blossomed into the character we know today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And that feels like a long time ago when we were first meeting Nash. I remember auditioning for the part and immediately loving what was coming off the page in terms of what Rachel and Ben had written. And he just seemed really fun, but also quite impish, mischievous. You couldn't quite get a grip on what kind of character he was. So when I first got my hands on him, it was a real joy because it just felt like I could take him in a number of different directions. So it was really fun to get the part, first of all, and then to really start to explore the different scenes he was in and what kind of relationship he was having with Eliza. And that was real fun for that to develop as well.
He goes from a character who can't be trusted, who is devious and manipulative, to a character who's surprisingly quite honest and vulnerable with Eliza. He tells her the truth about his brother. He allows himself to be emotionally exposed with her. What is it specifically about Eliza, then, that allows him to unburden himself? Why is she to be trusted in the end?
That's a very good question. I mean, he first unburdens himself as they go to a hotel in France and locked down underneath the hotel, and he reveals the fact that his brother was stabbed, and he unburdens himself with that story, and you get a first glimpse actually of what Nash's real reasons for being the way he is. So I think he realizes that Eliza and he are outsiders. He's come from Ireland. The Irish at the time were so badly treated. And I think for women in Victorian times, they had no rights. So I think he sees in her an outsider, and that intrigues him. But he also sees an outsider who's incredibly good at her job. And I think he finds that very attractive. And so they embark on this relationship, but it takes a long time. She does not trust him, and rightly so. He's a bit of a cad. You're never quite sure what you're getting with him. And Rachel and Ben, just incredible writing to always play that line of you were never quite sure what the truth is with him. And that's really interesting, I think, for an audience to watch and to be part of.
You mentioned earlier the Hotel Saint-Marc episode, which might be, I think, possibly my favorite episode of Miss Scarlet to date. And the rapport between the two of them really comes to fruition in that episode. They team up to locate Charles Percival, and it's here that Nash begins to tell Eliza about his late brother Michael. How did you read the scene between them where they might be physically handcuffed, but they've actually loosened their emotional shackles, we'll say?
It's a real gift. Ben and Rachel in every episode just seem to write scripts and scenes that I felt such affiliation to, or felt I could just really play with and enjoy. So I'd been having a lovely time playing Nash, and then suddenly the hotel episode pops up. It was so lovely to be given that script and then this nugget right in the middle. And Rachel and Ben have just written this incredible monologue. You don't really get that very often, where someone just gets to do this fantastic backstory. And I think the proximity of Kate and I within this dark dungeon, it was really dirty and dark and horrible down there. It was midwinter in Serbia, so incredibly, incredibly cold. And there were still flies just flying around down in this horrible basement. But it all set the scene for Kate and I to have this really close and beautifully written scene, and for the audience to finally see something beyond the charm and sinister, whatever word you wanted to use for Nash, all those things. The playfulness, he was suddenly really raw. And I liked also the fact that you weren't quite sure if he was telling the truth. You weren't sure if he was playing an angle. And I think that left a lot of audience members going, do I like Nash? I don't know. I think I do, but I don't know if I do. And it's only when I give Eliza the name of my brother that I think that seals that it's quite obvious that he's decided to let her in on a story that he's probably not told hardly anyone. But the whole hotel episode was just a romp. So I'm really pleased you loved it, Jace, because it's one of my favourite as well.
Nash giving Eliza his agency, Nash & Sons, is a bit of a monkey's paw. It's cursed from the start. It goes horribly wrong, partially because of Nash, as he loses his license when he's arrested. And their final scene together in Series 4 has Nash telling her,
"But I want you to think I'm a good person."
That will never happen, Patrick.
No? But I'll always keep trying.
what does he mean in that moment? Why is that so essential to him?
I think he's realised how important she is in his life. He shoots a man to defend her life, and I think it shows a connection that they have. And obviously all these scenes that they have together and the different storylines that they have, it binds them closer and closer and closer until in the end he's kind of saved her, really, from his brother's killer. And again, they had another beautiful scene in the prison, and I think he's just wanting to be open and truthful with her. And despite all of the arguing and, as you say, the monkey's paw of their deal of her running Nash & Sons going pretty badly wrong, despite us meeting the beautiful Clarence and Paul, the scene in the prison becomes a really important time for Nash to open up fully to her and just be something that I'm not sure that he is comfortable with, and that is being vulnerable. And I think he tries to do that in that scene, and he knows that she will be open to his vulnerability. And I think there's something really touching in that.
Before this next question, a brief word from our sponsors. Ocean voyages, expeditions, river journeys. Viking is dedicated to bringing travelers closer to the destination, offering a small ship experience and a shore excursion in every port. Learn more at Viking.com. Series 5 finds Nash in prison, but not much has changed for our favorite foppish private investigator. Even in the confines of Her Majesty's Prison Newgate, he still has his ear to the ground. He takes meetings in the prison governor's office. He's got access to whiskey. Despite being locked up, is Nash having the time of his life here?
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's having the worst time ever, does it? Feels like quite an open prison to me. He's almost living his best life apart from freedom. His cell seems comfortable enough. And yeah, I think he's got the ear of the prison governor. It was really fun to get those scenes and play those as well. And then to have Eliza be in there as well and then drink and have chats together is a really clever little move. And also gives us, he's able to provide a lot of backstory for Tom's character coming in, which is a really good way of giving that information and in an interesting way for the audience. So, it's Ben and Rachel being very clever and allowing also Eliza and Nash to have these quite heart-to-heart conversations, because he picks up on the fact that the Duke is no longer there. And he voices what she can't say, is that she wouldn't have been able to go to New York and be a private detective, which is what she wants to be. So it's a really clever scenes in the prison in particular.
He does see through that bravado that she's trying anyway to project. Do you see Nash then being perhaps more emotionally intuitive than he might let on? And is that perhaps a gift that serves him well as an investigator and here in these scenes as a friend?
Well, he's intuitive. He's street savvy. He's smart like that. Not in the same way that Eliza's super smart. I mean, she solves all the cases. She's very good at her job. He's a bit more blunt. But I think he's learned through the series that you've got to know Nash. I think he's learned an emotional equivalent that is quite new to him, but is certainly something that he's learning to use, particularly with her. But I think when you see Nash knocking her bravado down and saying, I can see you, and I can see you're in pain. She doesn't really answer, and I think her silence speaks volumes in that. His emotional advancement has been really compelling to track, and you start seeing far more of a full character rather than someone who is just, will you do anything you can just to get a job done.
Rachel and Ben have been upfront about the fact that they see Nash and Eliza's dynamic as being strictly platonic. Did you ever entertain the thought early on that Nash and Eliza's story might be heading into romantic territory?
Maybe. But I think it became more interesting if they didn't. And what you don't really see that often, maybe it's becoming more and more, but a man and a woman being friends and that being okay, and it doesn't have to always end in romance. And so for us to go down that route and also just allow the will they won't they story for the Duke and Eliza, that's interesting. That has kept audiences wrapped up in the series. And to add another will they won't they, I didn't think that would serve either Eliza or Nash's character very well. And what's been, I think, really fascinating is how two people who are intrigued by one another don't end up getting together, but they end up building a friendship that is lasting and a trust that is quite shaky, because he's a slippery old character. But I think that turned out to be a much more interesting avenue for us to play, for us to really explore. And I think Kate and I, well, I hope she'd admit to this, but we're good friends. I absolutely love her. It's been really fun to just transmit that onto the scenes and for us to be able to just have the kind of rat-a-tat-tat between one another with the conversations that we have. We're quite like that when we're just hanging out waiting to go on set anyway.
Episode 4 begins with Patrick reading from a novel in his cell.
He lay banished and alone, the smell of blood filling the air, rancid and sharp. His own, for a man of such meagre beginnings, he had left his mark.
A lot of rubbish.
Is there any truth in it about his own situation? Has he, as the novel's protagonist, left his mark?
Yeah, it's a clever bit of writing and one we really leaned in on because it is just telling his story, isn't it? And we had to shoot that a few times because it kept on making me laugh. Yeah, trying to do a switch of saying it was absolute rubbish. But yeah, it echoes Nash's life and him trying to find a place and trying to leave his mark is something that perhaps has pushed him finally to leave London and go somewhere else. So it was a fitting piece to read in prison and definitely put up a mirror to Nash's life.
He's summoned before the prison governor and learns that his sentence has been reduced.
Do you believe you've learned your lesson from being incarcerated?
Well, absolutely, sir. I'm a changed man.
In what way?
I've found faith. Every day I read a passage from the Bible, Old Testament and New. And I've also given up drinking.
Good. Glad to hear it.
While clearly an inveterate liar in that statement, has Nash been changed at all by his experience?
I'm not sure he's been changed that much by the prison experience. I think he's definitely been changed by not killing the man who killed his brother. I think that's a different step for him. So what has he learned and how has he grown? I think he's probably taken time to reflect and think about what he wants from life. So there is a change in terms of what his predicament is. When he leaves prison, he has nothing again. And he's having to start from the bottom and work up. Prison has given him some space to think about what he wants to do with his life. I'm not sure he's come up with the right answers, and that's certainly what we find out through the episode of him kind of flailing about and panicking because he's on a time frame of trying to solve a case to keep himself out of prison again. There's same, but different with Nash, I think, by the end of this episode. It's probably Nash 2.0 by the end.
Lord Campbell reveals that Nash was released from prison because he personally pulled some strings so that Nash can track down Campbell's errant brother who owes money to the notorious Dylan Cooper.
So I want you to find him.
Well, I no longer have a license to practice as a private investigator.
When did staying within the parameters of the law ever stop you? You are a crook, Nash. So let's not pretend otherwise.
What does Nash make of those words? Despite being engaged in criminality, does he see himself as a criminal?
I think those words sting. I don't think anyone likes to be called a crook, especially someone who's worked so hard to alleviate himself and move above the crooked landscape into a world private investigation is dirty, particularly in Victorian times, and quite Wild West-like in terms of there are few rules in trying to get the best possible outcome and trying to earn money and trying to live, trying not to die. So for him to be called that stings a lot and hurts. But also anything that is thrown at Nash, he's able to ingest and then really use as fire to propel himself forward. So anything bad that's happened to him, or people say things to him, oh, you're untrustworthy, oh, his brother is killed, he uses that as a way to really to go forward and move forward. He can wallow. There can be some times when he likes to wallow and feel sorry for himself, but generally he's got a good outlook of wanting to be positive and find the best outcome he possibly can.
I love the poker training scene between Nash and Clarence as Nash attempts to show Clarence how to play, only to have Clarence win, possibly by chance. I am just curious, how is Paul Baisley as a scene partner? How difficult is it to get through a scene, Paul?
Oh, he's a consummate actor. He comes with so many options. He's there to play. He's there to assist and yes, every scene and just be there present. But then what he also does is sprinkle the magic dust of Paul. Yeah, he's been doing it for years. His CV is as long as my arm, but he's such a generous and kind man as well. He'll just come out with something. He'll do a little nod. He's such an incredible looking man. I'm a terrible corpser anyway. I tell you what he allows you to do is keep it loose and keep it playful, because that's what you need, particularly for this show. There has to be an element of hijinks about it, because that's what keeps the energy going. That's what Ben and Rachel have written. It goes at a pace. You have to be on your toes, and all the actors who come in are all on it. And they're so well crafted in their character as well. And Paul just knows Clarence altogether, inside out, and allows us just to play. So yeah, I so love the poker scene. Absolute nightmare to play, because I had to keep on putting cards down. Using my hands and speaking at the same time, Jace, is not my forte. That's walking and talking. Just get me sat down behind a desk. That's much easier. But yeah, he was great. I could just concentrate on Paul and whatever he was doing. And yeah, he ends up winning as well. Him running out and us heading off in the horse-drawn carriage. It's super fun.
It's so great. Nash volunteers to pawn his pocket watch to finance Clarence's poker stake.
No, I bought this with my first paycheck. I didn't eat for a month, but it was worth it. I'd never owned anything so exquisite. In fact, I'd never owned anything at all.
What does the watch ultimately mean to Nash, and why does he part with it now?
Having this watch, what it represents is the first thing that he's bought probably for himself that he absolutely loves. He's obviously a flamboyant man and a man who loves the finer things in life, but that was not always his life. He would have come from depravity and poverty. So to own this incredible piece of workmanship and to realize that he could make money and own good things and make himself feel worthwhile, I think it's really important. That watch represents a first step of him becoming legitimate, him becoming not a crook, and him congratulating himself on survival and pushing forward, because he's always pushing forward. So for him to give up the watch, well, he gives it up for a bit, doesn't he? And then he comes back for it. But in that moment, it's really significant. And it's him being vulnerable again. It's him almost letting go of the past to try and survive. And he'll do anything that he can. And if that means giving up the things that he loves, if that means leaving the people that he loves, people like Eliza, people like Clarence, who perhaps he wouldn't ever tell them, but he does, he'll do that. But he is also someone who is hell-bent on survival. So he'll do whatever he can.
But at the same time, I mean, at the Rookery, they find Bertie Campbell. He escapes. Nash finds Bertie and turns him over to Lord Campbell in order to get his pocket watch back from the pawn shop. But rather than put him on a boat, Nash changes his mind and turns Bertie over to Eliza. Why does he do the right thing here when the wrong thing would be so much easier? If it is about survival, why do the right thing and complicate things?
Because he has to evolve. I think it's important for him to show Eliza that he has grown up and he could take one path, but he's choosing the other. And also, I think he talks about Australia as being a land of opportunity. And if there's one man who wants to take an opportunity, it's Nash. And he sees a whole new market to go and explore and a land to go and conquer. And there were enough criminals being sent to Australia at that point, so I think he's got his work cut out. And a lot of Irish brethren over there. So, you know, who's to say he's not going to have a wonderful time?
On that note, though, I mean, did you see the scene as offering a sort of goodbye for now, or has your role on Miss Scarlet come to an end? And if you were a gambling man, what would you wager?
Listen, there'll always be a bit of Nash in me, so I'm going to wager that there's always a window back for him to crawl through and come and say hi again. When I read the scene, I think it definitely leaves a door open for him to return. It's not done and dusted, and we'll wait and see if he does return in series to come. I hope so, because he's so much fun to play, and it would be lovely to go and see old friends again and get my hands on scripts that Rachel and Ben do such an incredible job with. It's been one of the most joyous jobs to work on. I've been fortunate enough to work for a number of years in the business, doing various things. But this one in particular, over the series that we've done from day one, it was welcoming, great fun, and it's continued to do that. And also the atmosphere that all the directors that we've had, what they set on set, what Kate is able to bring on set is it just allows everyone to have a good day at work. And that's what you want at the end of the day. So, yeah, I think it's adieu for now. And hopefully you will see Nash in the future. Do you know what? I'll put a heavy bet on it. How about that? I'll give my watch.
I was going to say, you will, however, be seen in just a few weeks on our screens again. You're playing Fuller in the upcoming miniseries Miss Austen on Masterpiece on PBS. What's next for you?
Yeah, that's coming up very soon. It coincides with Jane Austen's anniversary. It was a really fantastic period drama to be involved with. And again, working with old friends. I mean, obviously, once you work for a number of years, you come across the same people and people you haven't seen in a long time. And I got to work with my really good friend, Patsy Farron, who's incredible. So keep your eye on this space and hopefully you'll be seeing my face soon.
I can't wait. Felix Scott, thank you so very much.
Thanks, Jace. I really enjoyed this. It's been super fun. Thank you.
Next time, in the world of Miss Scarlet, Eliza continues to make slow but steady progress with the new detective inspector.
You assume changing the subject will somehow distract me from your unauthorized entry.
Did it?
No.
Oh.
Next week, we're joined by Miss Scarlet's newest cast member, Tom Durant Pritchard, who investigates the reasons behind Alexander Blake's chilly exterior. Masterpiece Studio is hosted by me, Jace Lacob, produced by Jack Pombriant, and edited by Robin Bissett. Alicia Etup is our sound designer. The executive producer for Masterpiece is Suzanne Simpson.